Okay, so um, we are focusing on delivery, and in particular, I want people to stop reading. I want people to primarily stop reading their presentations, but I also want people to stop memorizing their presentations. And I would like people to start using notes such as this we have here about Steve Jobs. Okay, I know some of you are much more comfortable when you write something out. And that's okay, right? That's okay. But once you write it out, the big temptation is that you want to read it. And reading is not okay. So just give us a bit of space here. So imagine you've done your research and you've divided your presentation into three parts about Steve Jobs' early life, Apple and Pixar, and death and legacy. I think maybe we'll divide this into two and show you what I would do. So we've got work, and then we could divide this further. So here we have Apple. Here we have Pixar. Okay, so if we have a look at our introduction first, our introduction is pretty much written now. Hello, thank you for coming. My name's Dean. Today, I'm going to give you a presentation about one of the most influential businessmen that has ever lived. He was American. He lived in San Francisco. And he was probably the most important designer and inventor of our lifetime. He died very young. Unfortunately, at the age of 40, but his legacy lives on. There are probably 20 examples of his life's work in this room today. That's right. I'm talking about Steve Jobs. I've divided my presentation into three parts. First, I'll talk about his early life. Then I'll talk about his work, and in particular with Apple and Pixar. And finally, I will discuss his death and legacy. Right, let's begin with his early life. Okay, and then really it's just a question of doing your research and making sure you have the information you want. As I said here, I checked with ChatGPT to see what came up. And you can see my question here. Write a 3-minute presentation on the life of Steve Jobs. Right, and this is what came up. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'd like to take a moment to reflect on the life and legacy of one of the most influential figures in modern technology, Steve Jobs. Born February 24th, 1955 in San Francisco, Steve Jobs co-founded Apple Inc. in 1976, a company that would go on to revolutionize the technological industry. Jobs' vision and relentless pursuit of perfection. So it's a very nice, right? It's very nice language and presentation, but it's not your language. right? And your audience aren't going to understand these things. So be honest. Do you know relentless? Do you know the meaning of relentless? Do you know the meaning of remarkable corporate turnarounds? And if so, can you pronounce it in a way that other people would know? So knowing language isn't just about translating it and checking the meaning. It's also about being able to pronounce that language. Okay, so if you can't pronounce it and you're not really sure what it means, simplify it. Use language that is more simple. Okay, so if you just ask ChatGPT to write you a presentation about Steve Jobs, this is what's going to come out, and it's going to be very difficult to read. Product aesthetics. Can you say that word? Will people understand it? Probably not. So stay away from memorizing or reading these things, because it's going to be clear that it's not your language, and nobody is really going to want to hear it. Nobody's going to understand it. Okay, so simplify it. So one example of overcomplicated and difficult vocabulary came up in a class where somebody was giving a presentation on Abraham Lincoln. And they said one of the things he was most famous for was signing the Emancipation Proclamation. I don't even know how to spell it. Right, so this is straight from Wikipedia, probably. And a student has put this in his presentation. Now, not only could he not pronounce it, nobody understood it. Okay, so what he needed to do was simplify the language. Abraham Lincoln was famous for ending slavery. Okay, so there's an example. People are much more likely to understand ending slavery than signing the Emancipation Proclamation. He could also pronounce ending and slavery, making it more easier for people to understand. So don't use vocabulary that is too difficult for yourself to pronounce and for your audience to understand. Okay, back to Steve Jobs. So actually what I did with this, because the language was obviously too much, first I asked ChatGPT to do the same presentation in the style of a 12-year-old. Okay, but this had its own problems as well. And the language it gave was very childish, very informal, and not at all academic in any way. And then just out of interest, asked it to do it in the style of a Japanese language student with English ability of Common European Framework B1. That means intermediate level. And this is what it came up with. Hello, everyone. I would like to share some information about Steve Jobs, the famous American entrepreneur. So it's still including language that I don't think people will be able to pronounce. I have problems with this word, entrepreneur. It's a very difficult word to pronounce, and it's French. But the point is, if you do source your information from places such as Wikipedia, ChatGPT, then you should probably be very careful about the language you use and simplify that language.